So guys, we've seen this story before. Every offseason, the national media finds a reason to doubt the Commanders. And this year is no different. NFL analysts are predicting this team to finish near the bottom of the standings. In fact, one analyst is predicting the Commanders to finish just 4-2-3rd, even below their 2025 season record. Now, the question is, are they actually judging this team based on the current roster, or are they still stuck in old narratives? Let's take a closer look at these predictions, the reasoning behind them, and whether the Commanders are being underestimated once again. What's up, Commanders Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook, Commanders. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So let's start with where this whole debate even came from, because I think it matters how we got here. NFL had 7 of their analysts put out win-loss predictions for every team, and when it came to the Commanders, the results were really rough. You had Colleen Wolfe at 7-10, Lance Zierlein at 7-10, Grant Gordon at 7-10, Dan Parr at 6-11, Bucky Brooks at 7-10. We had only one analyst, and shout out to her, Brooke Cersamo, who actually had us at 9-8, which honestly should be the floor in my opinion. But then you had Nick Shook, who came out with a 4-13 prediction, 4 wins, 13 losses. That's not just a skeptical take, that's basically saying this team is one of the worst rosters in football, right there with the true bottom feeders of the league. And on top of all that, the NFL's own YouTube channel put out a season preview video for us that, it was rough to watch. It opened with some joke comparing us to a one-hit wonder band, then somehow said our starting center missed the entire season last year, which isn't even true. The guy played in 16 of 17 games. They spent time talking about a receiver we don't even really rely on as a key piece, while barely mentioning some of our actual difference makers. So, you've got this combination of a national outlet that clearly didn't do its homework, and then this one analyst prediction that's lower than almost anybody else in the league. That's really how this debate got started, and once you see that 4-13 number sitting there next to a bunch of 7-10s, you start asking yourself, wait, is that number actually about talent? Or is it about something else entirely? Now, look, I want to be clear, most of these 7-10 and 6-11 predictions, I don't actually think those are unreasonable on their own. I can see the logic behind somebody looking at this roster, looking at this schedule, and landing somewhere around 500. What bothers me is the outlier, the guy who's 10 wins lower than everybody else on the same exact panel, looking at the same exact roster. When 6 out of 7 analysts land in a tight range and one guy is wildly off to the side, that tells you something about how that one prediction got built, and it's worth actually digging into instead of just accepting it at face value. Now here's where I want to be fair, because I actually think it's important to hear the reasoning instead of just being mad about the number. Nick Shook went on the record and explained himself, and I respect that he didn't just throw the number out there and run from it. His argument was basically this. He said he built every team's schedule out game by game instead of just eyeballing the roster, and when he got to us, he landed on a rough record. He pointed out our first 3 games are against the Eagles, the Cowboys, and the defending champion Seahawks, and he's not wrong. That's a brutal opening stretch by anybody's standard. And his reasoning wasn't that he thinks this roster is bad on paper, it was more that there's a lot of unknown pieces that haven't played together yet. Guys like Leo Chenna and Sonny Styles, guys who look great individually but haven't proven it in this specific defense yet. He also brought up depth at playmaker on offense outside of Terry McLaurin, saying guys like Antonio Williams and Treylon Burks are still unproven at this level. And of course, the big one, Jayden Daniels' durability, since he didn't finish a full season last year because of injury. So, when you actually hear him lay it out, it's not some random hot take pulled out of thin air. It's built on real questions that this fan base has been asking too, if we're being honest with ourselves. The disagreement, at least from where I sit, is more about degree than about substance. 6-11, maybe 7-10, I can have that conversation all day and not even get mad about it. 4-13 though, that's usually reserved for teams that are genuinely broken from top to bottom, teams with no quarterback answer, no identity, nothing to build around. And I don't think anybody, even the people predicting us low, actually believes that's what this roster is walking into camp. So, are these concerns actually fair? Some of them, yeah. Honestly, I'm not going to sit here and act like everything is perfect. The cornerback room is kind of a question mark because it genuinely is right now. Trey Amos is entering year 2, and we genuinely don't know what he's going to be yet, whether he takes that leap or whether he's still finding his footing. That's one of the real storylines of the whole season, and I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But some of the other logic doesn't really hold up as well once you apply it across the rest of the league. Think about it this way. If Joe Burrow goes down, the Bengals aren't going anywhere either, and they haven't even seen a playoff game in years, even with him healthy for most of that stretch. If Patrick Mahomes goes down, the Chiefs aren't a top team anymore, full stop. Every single contender in this league lives and dies with their quarterback's health. That's just modern football. That's not a Commander-specific problem. So, using what if Jayden Daniels gets hurt again as the reason, we're a bottom 5 team specifically, I think that's applying a different standard to us than everybody else gets across the board. And on the offensive line and running back question, if Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt gets the carries people expect him to get behind this offensive line, it's a real 1,000-yard back conversation. And that changes everything about how much weight Jayden Daniels has to carry by himself every single week. So yeah, some of the concerns are legitimate things to actually watch for. The health question is real. The cornerback development is real, but some of the other reasoning feels like it's built entirely on last year's disaster and just hasn't been updated for what this roster actually looks like right now. It's almost like some of these predictions got locked in back in January and nobody bothered to revisit them after an entire offseason of moves, hires, and roster changes actually happened. So that brings me to what I think the national media is completely missing here, because honestly, there's a lot of it. Start with the coaching and front office change. Nobody's talking about enough. Demitrius Washington getting hired as a senior personnel executive, a guy who spent years with Adam Peters building a strong analytics background together out in San Francisco. That's the front office continuing to build real depth behind the scenes, and it barely got a mention anywhere in these national breakdowns. Then you've got Terry McLaurin, and even ESPN believes he will be a breakout candidate this season, with their reasoning being if he starts getting more motion, more slot work. More funnel targets on third down and in the red zone the way certain other elite receivers get used around the league, he could put up career-best numbers across receptions, yards, and touchdowns. That's a legitimate, well-reasoned take, and it barely made a ripple compared to all the doom and gloom predictions everywhere else. On top of that, ESPN's own roster projection had Van Jefferson listed as our starting number 2 receiver and had our starting linebackers listed as 2 guys who aren't even the ones we expect to actually start, completely ignoring Leo Chenal's role in this defense entirely. So you've got major outlets making basic roster mistakes on who's even on the field, while also somehow finding room to call us one of the worst teams in the league in the same breath. And then there's the scheme change itself, which I think is the biggest thing getting overlooked. And nobody in the league has actually seen what David Blough's offense looks like yet, live in real games. Nobody has seen what Daronte Jones's defense looks like yet either. We're all guessing based on pieces of what these coordinators have run before with other teams, but the truth is this is a brand new system on both sides of the ball. And that's a real element of surprise that the media just isn't factoring into these predictions at all. Okay, now let's talk about the double standard, because this is the part that really gets under my skin every single time. The Bengals get so much benefit of the doubt around the league, and look, I get it, Joe Burrow is one of the best quarterbacks alive when healthy. But they haven't been back to the playoffs since that one Super Bowl run years ago, and nobody's out here calling them a bottom 5 roster or a 4-win team. Last year, everybody clowned the Patriots for having an easy schedule and running with it, and this year everybody wants to hand us a brutal schedule as a reason we're going to struggle, instead of treating it as an actual opportunity to prove something real. It's the same exact thing that happened to us back in 2024, when nobody expected anything from this team either, or we all remember how that turned out. And honestly, I think a lot of it still comes down to the fact that we're still fighting the reputation this franchise built up over years and years under the old ownership regime. Even with new ownership and Josh Harris and this front office completely rebuilding the culture here from the ground up, there's still this lingering stench from that era that other teams around the league just don't have to deal with. Other rebuilding teams get patience and the benefit of the doubt. We get 4-13 predictions and jokes about one-hit wonder bands. And it's not just the record predictions either, it's the little things too. It's a national broadcast getting our own starting center's playing time wrong. It's a roster projection listing the wrong guys as our starting linebackers, like our actual players don't even exist on the depth chart. Where a team like the Bengals or the Chiefs has a rough offseason storyline, you rarely see this level of carelessness in how the coverage gets put together. But with us, it feels like a lot of these breakdowns get rushed out without anybody actually checking the roster first, and then that sloppy version becomes the narrative that sticks for months. That's the double standard in a nutshell. Other franchises get the benefit of careful analysis. We get a punchline and a low number, and then everybody moves on to the next team on the list. So, what happens if the national media is wrong again? Because, let's be real, this wouldn't be the first time this has happened. Going into 2024, nobody outside of this fan base believed in this roster either, and we ended up in the NFC title game further than almost anybody predicted. That doesn't mean history just automatically repeats itself, and I'm not sitting here saying we're guaranteed anything, but it does mean that betting against this organization right now, at this exact point in the rebuild, with this quarterback, with this front office, feels like the same mistake people made before. If Jayden Daniels stays on the field, if this defense even takes a modest step forward from being one of the worst units in the league last year, this record prediction conversation is going to look completely different by October. And I think the people who put out these numbers know that too, deep down, even if they won't say it out loud right now. Let's talk about the biggest X factors heading into 2026, because these are the things that are actually going to decide whether we're closer to that 9-win range or closer to some of these darker predictions. Number one, obviously, is Jayden Daniels' health. Everything runs through him, his legs, his arm, his ability to extend plays. If he plays close to a full season, this offense looks completely different than it did for stretches of last year. Number two is Terry McLaurin staying on the field alongside him, because when those two had a full season together before, the numbers were legitimately special, and this offense has never really gotten that same version back since. Number three is this cornerback room, specifically what Trey Amos becomes in year 2, because that position group is genuinely the biggest unknown on the entire roster right now. Number 4 is the running game, because if Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt turns into that 1,000-yard presence people think he can be behind this offensive line, that takes so much pressure off everybody else on that side of the ball. And number 5, honestly, is just health across the board on defense, because last year this defense got completely gutted by injuries at the worst possible time, and if these new additions can just stay on the field together, this unit has a real chance to look like a completely different group than what we saw a year ago. And there's a sixth one people aren't talking about enough, which is chemistry on this offensive line. If that group can stay healthy and gel together early, that opens up everything else. The running game, the play action, the protection for Jayden Daniels, all of it. That's the kind of quiet factor that doesn't show up in a highlight reel but ends up deciding 4 or 5 games by the end of the year. So where does that leave us? The truth is somewhere in the middle, but a lot closer to the optimistic side than these predictions want you to believe. This roster earned its way into these conversations 2 years ago, went quiet for a year because of injuries and bad luck, and now it's right back to being doubted like none of that ever happened. I've seen this pattern before with this exact franchise, and I think we're about to see it again. Let this team get through training camp healthy, let the season actually start, and watch how fast some of these same analysts start walking these numbers back. That's my final verdict on all of this, and honestly, I wouldn't bet against this team proving people wrong one more time. So, drop your own record prediction down in the comments. I want to see how far off you think the national media actually is this time around.